For this video, we want to look at what kind of war did our soldiers fight in Vietnam. And we're going to cover three key elements here: guerrilla versus conventional tactics, search and destroy versus command and conquer, and booby traps and tunnels. To understand what Vietnam was like, you got to know what it wasn't. Now, in World War II, we used a tactic called command and conquer. We moved into enemy territories, we conquered those areas. Once we commanded them, we'd move into another enemy territory and command and conquer that until the enemy was all out of areas to control. Now notice on the right-hand side, you can identify the German soldiers from World War II because they wore German Nazi uniforms. On the bottom left, you can see a typical uniform of a Japanese soldier from World War II. Now, the Vietnamese army, the Viet Cong, used guerrilla warfare tactics. It's now usually called asymmetrical warfare. On the top right, you can see a guerrilla fighter from North Vietnam. He's actually the guy in the plaid shirt being executed in this photo. He was captured during the Tet Offensive in 1968 and killed by one of our allies in the streets of Saigon. That was typical uniform of a North Vietnamese soldier. It's not a uniform at all. It's typical civilian clothing, so he can hide within the civilian populations, jump out when American soldiers least expect it, throw a bomb, maybe fire a couple shots, and then disappear back into the crowd. U.S. soldiers, on the other hand, were in the Army green. They all have similar patches. You notice the guy in the front has a helmet versus the guy behind him has a hat, but they're both clearly U.S. military. You can tell by the color and the uniformity of it. You can see why they were doing this sort of warfare because of the lack of technology. On the bottom, you can see the U.S. military has tanks and airplanes and bombers and aircraft carriers and flamethrowers and a huge amount of technology to throw into the war. On the top, you can see the North Vietnamese army has a complete lack of technology, just a lot of willing soldiers ready to put on their regular clothes, grab a gun, grab a bomb, and get to work attacking U.S. soldiers. The problem with using the civilian population is that the civilians become human shield. You see pictures here from Vietnam of civilians who were caught in the war. On the bottom, you can see a woman and some children hiding with U.S. soldiers, hoping they don't get caught in the crossfire. More than 500,000 civilians were killed in Vietnam between 1965 and 1974. This number is just an estimate, and I've seen estimates reach much higher. Different sources will go as high as 4 million. The causes of these deaths included everything from assassinations to massacres, terror tactics, mortar and artillery fire, aerial bombing, and military operations conducted in heavily populated areas. A lot of this was dictated by our enemy. For example, in the Tet Offensive, the enemy moved into the cities so they could use the civilian population as human shields. We attacked the North Vietnamese with aerial bombing that destroyed huge amounts of towns that did cause civilian deaths. Massacres included one notable one from the U.S. called the My Lai Massacre, as well as one conducted by the North Vietnamese called the Hue Massacre. Tragically, there was just too many ways for civilians to get caught up in the war. And so no matter what source you look at, civilian casualty numbers are going to be shockingly high. Now, in order to conquer an enemy like this, instead of measuring victory in the amount of territory we conquered, we measured victory in body count. How many soldiers did we kill that day? The typical job for a U.S. soldier was to move through the jungles, sometimes towns and villages, looking for the enemy so that they might kill him. However, the enemy made it very difficult to locate them. So when we found evidence of where they had been, we typically lit it on fire and destroyed anything that they might use against a U.S. soldier. And the North Vietnamese fought us by laying traps and by hiding in their extensive tunnel networks. You can see they could pop out from all around where soldiers were walking. They could hide within towns that we were going through. They could come out in the water, through air vents, through people's houses. At the time, going into the tunnels was one of the most dangerous jobs a U.S. soldier can do. Now that the war has been over for decades, you can visit them as a tourist trap. You can even have dinner in them.